90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we're going to be talking about organizing your way for success, and also as a way to reduce conflict between others in your world who may be neater or less neat than you, and how to bridge the gap, so to speak. And with us today, we have an organizational expert, and she helps people and businesses and families to do this all the time. And our guest is Kelly McMenamin, and she helps people organize their lives, their offices, and their homes. Kelly, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken.
People may be home more during COVID, and it may be more of a problem. Maybe the mess builds up. Maybe they're not socializing, but they also have to work and live in limited space. So has COVID highlighted some of the different organizational styles and extremes that can lead to problems?
Oh my God, yes. Because you're spending so much more time at home together with people. So something that you could ignore because you were only there for a couple hours has become a big deal. And also because everyone's working from home and you have papers and rooms are doing double duty. I mean, there's probably a million more bedroom/home offices than there were a year ago.
And sometimes it creates strife between, different styles. It's very, someone takes it personally if another family member leaves something out. Maybe it's a hazard, or maybe it's just a visual effect, or it destroys or distorts their view of neat and order. And that can lead to bigger battles.
Yes, correct. You are 100% correct. And, everybody has their own organizing style. I mean, that's what we found out. My company, Pixies, did it. We did field research with clients over 10 years. And basically what we found was there's 4 overarching types, but the main difference between those types is there's some types that don't mind a mess, don't mind as many papers, it doesn't bother them, they don't mind the piles, and some that are stressed out by seeing clutter and piles. So when you're home more and you're working from home, you're going to see whenever you have different styles like that between the visual messy ones and the neater ones, you're going to have more things come to a head, to put it politely, and problems. And
there's a vast divide in how neat people are and what people consider messy.
Yeah,
but you can get the two worlds to meet, or at least tolerate each other.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the biggest problems is are neat people. I'm an organizer, and my personality type, my organizing style, we call it classic, and I like things to be hidden away. I like things to be neat. If there is a pile, I like that pile to be neat, and I am almost driven, if I see a couple of messy piles, to tidy it up. And I'm going to tidy it up, and I'm going to feel instantly less stressed. But then the person who's a visual messy person, if it's their piles, they're going to lose their mind that I touched their pile, because they remember how their piles look. And when I straighten them up, they can't find documents in a pile anymore. It's foreign to me, but because I studied it for a decade, I understand it now. So I never mess with people's piles without talking to them. So that would be one conflict resolution is, if you're a neat and tidy person, you can't stand in the clutter or the mess. You have to talk ahead of time or work with the person who's driving you crazy or their mess to touch it and deal with it.
And there's some room for compromise to take a gentle. So what are some ways to take a gentle first step to get the messier person, for lack of a better term, to be more organized for visual effect and for their own life? Maybe it makes their work easier. And so the neater person becomes a little more tolerant.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing is you need to discuss why it impacts you, why you care, why you can't handle the piles, that it actually stresses you out. I think anyone who is driven to be neat and tidy, the reason is because they're calmer after things are put away, and their brain is kind of in a blue state of calm. So if you explain that to the messy person, rather than judging their mess and telling them something's wrong with them, that if anything, it's you and you just need this for your own peace of mind, it tends to have them be more open to whatever solutions you guys come up with. The second thing is a lot of solutions for pilers is to come up with, where they tend to put piles. We use open, transparent bins, no lids ever, or they'll forget what's in there. And having that structure around it helps people who are neat and tidy be okay with the piles, even if they're out. That's a good compromise.
Sometimes if it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
Especially for the visual, messy people. And that's why it's a compromise to have the bins and the structure. And oftentimes we recommend labels, and that way people can interact with the piles. If you know what that pile is, you're not going to put something random on it. You're not going to put catalogs and mess up their pile because that was their actual inbox or something like that, and they don't want to see a furniture catalog in there.
And you're going to help them organize their life or their work or personal related, let's say, papers in a way that they can find things, but they can. It will be easy and less stressful for them to become a little bit more neat and more organized.
Yes. How you organize, the organizing styles I was talking about are hardwired into your brain. Sure, we all have, I call it environmental influence, or your parents or your teachers, and that impacts how we organize, but it really is hardwired how you organize, what's your natural tendencies, and you really want to work with those tendencies rather than fighting them, because then you'll keep it up. You'll stay organized.
And this also can lead to conflict at work, too, with people of different personality stuffs. Just seeing your messy desk, even though it's not theirs, just upsets them. Yeah,
I mean, it's easy. It's really hard if you have an open floor, like a trading floor or something like that, because then it's always in people's view. If you have an office where you can close it, that's always better if you're somebody who is visual messy. But, you do have a conflict at work. Sometimes people are good at work at pretending to be somebody they're not and trying to follow the rules that maybe an office has in terms of mess and clutter being out. But those people often can't keep it up at home. So sometimes that's why you'll see people complain about people's home offices almost more than in the office, because they're actually being their true selves at home.
I think you also recommend that people pick and choose their battles. So what are some ways that one spouse can get the other, or one partner or roommates can get the other to be a little neater, and for that neater person to be a little more tolerant?
Well, at the top of my head, usually it's that I tell people to think of what are the one or two things, both messy people and neat people, and maybe not one thing, a couple of things that are just, they absolutely need to have this for their sanity. And, usually for a tidy person, it's XYZ being put away. And then for the messier person, it's XYZ being kept out. And so each person, whether you're at home or in an office, needs to think of the things that they need to be able to function and not be stressed or not screw up, and let the other person know what those things are. And then everything else, you kind of find a compromise that works, but you get your most important things. And if you have and you want them to be the ones that are really like the core to your success. And then the other ones, you work at trying to be neater if you're messy, and letting go if you're the tidier one. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is figuring out what's essential to you and then explaining it to the other person.
And for the messy person, perhaps a letting go of stuff it can also be a big problem, because one reason, that they may just have piles, or they may have a lot of stuff and they're reluctant to let it go. So what's your intervention? How does your intervention start in a situation like that? Well, perhaps someone has to move, or they're living and working at home. They have to make more room, or their family's expanding, or they're moving to a smaller house or smaller rooms, and they have to make these changes.
You can find all personality types that have a lot of clutter on hand, but classics, we call the 4 types are classics, funds, smarts, and organics. And classics and funds, usually have a lot of clutter when they don't have a lot of time at home to get rid of it. And those ones, it's like, okay, you need to sit down, you need to make decluttering a priority, and usually they can get around to doing it. And you kind of know if that's you because you're the person who in the midst of decluttering are like, oh my God, this is amazing, I feel so much better, or right afterwards. But the other ones, organics and smarts, they're more big picture, visual, and some of them really like their stuff. And so actually decluttering isn't that fun, and they don't do it very often, and they tend to have more stuff. And the process with them is really trying to figure out a way to make that decision process of letting go of stuff that really, in the end of the day, they don't truly care about, how to do that. And the system we came up with, we call it later boxes. And it came out of really, my mom is an organic and had trouble letting go of things. And she was our client number one, like 15 years ago, where we put everything in boxes and all the declutter that she was in between on, where you're like, oh, I like that, I don't know, in between stuff. And there's a lot of in between stuff for smarts and organics. And you put them in boxes, you label them by room, but not everything that's in there. And then you really want to get it out of whatever your daily space is, whether you're talking about an office or an entire house. You can do this room by room. And then you give yourself a certain amount of time, 3 months, 12 months. I mean, some people, we've even had them, rent a storage space, people who live in apartments. And after that amount of time, whatever you missed, and you can, during that time, write down like, oh, you know what? I really wanted those binders from my 20s or what have you. And then when the time comes, you go and get this stuff, but you'll realize I didn't miss like 90% of what's there. I mean, sometimes people literally miss nothing. They remember nothing that's in there. And so all of a sudden, what would have been impossible and all that clutter is just gone, and you don't care because it helped you. It's almost like the time, it's like distance doesn't make the heart grow fonder with clutter, with smarts and organics. It helps you let go.
I just want to remind our listeners, you're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College. We're talking with Kelly McMenamin, and she is a professional organizer. She'll tell us about her book in a minute and give us additional tips on how the neat people can get along with the less neat people and both end up in a better place, and how everyone can be a little happier at the end of the day. Going back to your sorting out process, that helps speed it up so people don't think about it, don't keep an item out that they don't really need. So there's going to be a toss pile, a save pile, and that in between, and that the revisit pile. And then with days or weeks or months later, you're going to help them revisit the revisit pile and wean it down.
Right. And
again, if they're still not sure, it can be put off to revisit again, but you want to get them to get rid of some stuff.
Well, what we really want to do, is get it out of their daily life so that you're not having all this clutter, and then you're not having conflict, which is usually one of the main reasons people want to declutter, because there's somebody who can't stand the clutter, and you on your own would have been fine with it, but that's really where decluttering a lot of times comes from. And our idea, the later boxes, like what you were saying, the revisit pile, we call it later boxes, that it helps people let go because you're not worried about making a mistake, because that you're worried about letting go of something and then missing it and it's gone forever. So if you have it out of your daily life for, like, let's say 6 months and you didn't miss it, all of a sudden you realize, I'm never going to miss it, right? If it's not part of my daily life and I didn't miss it, I'm never going to miss it. And, that's a really big, learning or takeaway for types that have problems decluttering. And it's helpful, especially with conflict at home.
And do you give people a safe space as well? So if it could start out with the common areas being neat, let's say the living room or the kitchen or the den, or then it could expand while everyone retains their private area where they're allowed a little mess, whether it's a box, a closet, or their own den or bedroom.
I like your idea of the one little box.
Like a safe, messy room.
Yeah.
One messy room.
We do recommend that. We at Pixies did it. We are always telling people that the messiest person needs a space to be able to just be their shoes off self. And it could be a closet. It could be that they're allowed to just kick off their shoes in the closet without lining them up. Some incredibly different people. Opposites attract, right? So that a lot of opposites are married and drive each other crazy. And it really is just their organizing style. But if you have a closet, you have an office, if you're the messy one, it has to be kind of truly hands-off. It's difficult for tidy people to be hands-off, but it is necessary for the messier types' sanity.
But you can get them to agree on a starting point that this corner, this table, this room, or these rooms will be relatively clutter-free.
And messy people usually can do that because you've lived in your parents' home when there are rules, or in the office there are rules and you generally follow them. And a lot of times we just forget that at home, like a home is your home, so you don't think about it like it should be a household that's run like an office. And essentially, you should have rules for that everybody can get along in the common areas. And it's the same way as having an office. And
some kind of compromise. Well, because if they're getting, maybe you still have a space that you don't have to organize. You can just dump your stuff, and maybe it's out of sight and out of mind.
Yes. But you also need to come up with compromises for communal spaces or agreed upon rules that work with both, so that it isn't just that the tidy person wins out on all common areas, because that tends to be what happens because it means so much more to them to have everything hidden away. One client couple we have that were opposites in this sense. There was a problem with the messier person, the more visual. She was an organic, and she would walk by her dining room table with the mail, drop it, and the pile would build over the week. And before her husband moved in, this worked great for her because every time she would walk by the pile, it reminded her to do her bills. And she also had it as her to-do list to do her bills, but she needed both of those to remind her. And it drove, when her husband moved in, they got married, and he's like, oh, this is driving me crazy. And so he would take the pile and hide it behind a cabinet close by. And for a couple of months, she forgot to do the bills. And he's like, how do you forget to do the bills? And she's like, this was my system. Part of it was seeing that pile as I walked by every day. It was a visual reminder. And when he put it behind closed doors, it ceased to exist for her. So what we came up with was like an acrylic wall folder where, sometimes you see them in doctors' offices where there's magazines in them, but it's kind of clear, see-through. And it was along the walk in a place that didn't bother him, but it was along her walk kind of near where she used to dump the mail on the dining room table. And she dumped it there, but she still walked by, saw it, and remembered, oh, I have the bills. But it was contained enough in a way and not on the dining room table. And those are the kind of compromise you're looking for, where it goes with her natural tendencies or this person's, and the other one isn't bothered by it as much. So
you're trying to enhance their neatness quotient, but also reduce conflict. So there's no grenades that are going to be launched. So it might be you're keeping the kitchen relatively clean, but you're going to have one spot for the bills that's, a place you can see, so you can take care of that.
Right.
But it might be a box
or
a container.
Was, seeing the bills, walking by them, remembering it. Like I kept the core part of what her system was, and just made it, amenable to what the tidier spouse needed.
We'll take that to the next level in a moment. But tell us about your book, Organize Your Way.
Organize Your Way came out of over 10 years of field research. My sister and I started this company, Pixies Did It, organizing people in the city. And the genesis of it was really the two of us frustrating each other over a lifetime. We're the classic odd couple. I'm Felix and she's Oscar. And we were forced to share a bedroom as kids and drove each other crazy. And I tried half my life to get her to organize the way I thought she should, my way. And one day she was like, maybe I need different systems. Maybe these just don't work for me. Maybe nothing's wrong with me. And so we actually came up with a system for her. She used to just have one big pile of paper on her desk, and we came up with a piling system. And she stayed organizing and find things. And from there, we found different solutions that work for types, that are more like her, a messy, the Oscars of the world. And then systems for people like me, Felixes of the world. And from there, grew our business with clients at home and in the corporate world, and wrote this book, Organize Your Way. And it's all the simple strategies we give our clients.
And where can our listeners find that book?
At Amazon. You can buy Organize Your Way on Amazon or our website, pixiesdidit.com.
And just spell that out for us.
Sure, it's PIXIESDIDIT.com.
Okay, and do you have other tips or videos about organizing and information on the kind of services and support you provide?
I have years of tips on our blog. We have a blog, and we have a couple of videos up there, interviews, both TV and radio, and and you can hire us and schedule stuff online to talk to us virtually. We do coaching as well as in person. Obviously, not a lot of people. It's been a COVID kind of year for an organizer, but.
And you can also de-escalate the tensions and resolve the conflict between family members or between roommates or between spouses. Because this, as you said earlier, the different styles lead to a great deal of conflict.
Well, I think one of the problems is that opposites attract. When it comes to love, opposites attract. And then with siblings, you can't choose. And so there's often a ton of problems with just different people's approach to how they manage not only their physical belongings, but their time, scheduling, planning. All these differences are kind of hardwired into, who we are, regardless of who our parents are or how we were raised.
So we have to do a little bit better and be a little more tolerant of those who don't share our values, whether about neatness or mess.
You can, on our website or in our book, so on our website, pixiesdidit.com, and our book, Organize Your Way, we have the style quiz, the personality quiz, so you can figure out what your type is and then read about it. But you also have all the other descriptions of the other personality types, and a lot of times people instantly know who their spouse is, who their parent is, who their sibling is, and it helps you realize, oh my God, I had no idea. There was one client when she found out that other people were like her husband and left cupboard doors open. She was blown away because she just thought this was this particular annoying habit that drove her crazy. Maybe thought it was something his parents taught her or what have you. But it really is, something that we found a particular personality type, the smarts, tend to do.
So being more tolerant about someone else's style, be they messy or neat, can help to make a person more tolerant about other issues. And they won't stereotype that person as much one way or the other. Yes, and it doesn't mean you can't change. It's just like we all know, change is hard. So if you can work with what somebody does naturally, it's always easier. And the way I describe organizing style and personality type is it's like you're left-handed or you're right-handed. And so, you tend to catch a ball, with your dominant hand, or, it doesn't mean you can't do it with the other one. I often, when I do talks, I start off with an exercise where I have people write down their name on the top of the paper. And everyone always uses their dominant hand. I'm right-handed. I'd never think, oh, you know what, I'm going to randomly use my left hand, because you always go with what's dominant. So with organizing style, it isn't that messy people aren't capable of putting things away, never remembering something is behind a closed door. It's just not their first instinct. And so it takes a lot longer to find things and think about them when they're doing something with their left hand, but they're right-handed. And it's a question of priorities. That neat person is going to spend as many hours a day trying to be extra neat, and the messy person is going to spend little or no time trying to be neater. Well, and so a neat person might say, oh, I prioritize it, you need to prioritize it. But that neat person prioritizes it because they're driven to. It makes them feel calm. In order to feel calm, they can't sit in a messy room. They have to clean it up. And then afterward, they're like, oh, my God, now I can relax and watch TV. Whereas a messy person can sit in a messy room and watch TV. Or if there's a messy room in the other room, they can just close the door on it. I mean, as a neat person, at the end of the day, I tidy up my whole house. This is something, my sister, who is the opposite of me, would never in a million years do. But I do it to feel relaxed. So it's a priority to me because being relaxed is a priority, but it's the reverse for a messy person who can just relax. So let's go back to the start, the beginning of the process. How do you get someone to be a little bit neater and the other person to be a little more tolerant? Let's say two people having a conversation. So if it's... Or how do you oversee the conversation? I oversee the conversation by getting at why it's important to them.
And I think when people hear the other person talking about why it's important that at the end of the day, the kitchen's tidied and the dishes are away, that there's not dirty dishes in the sink, because that's a big divide you often find with people. Sometimes I don't see it physically, because when you're an organizer, people always clean up something and maybe they're going to do their sink. But when you sit down and actually talk to somebody, it comes out that there's a couple of things they just can't stand the thought of, and it would stress them out. And then the messy person can see, especially if it's your spouse, like you don't actually want to stress them out. And so you think, okay, all right, these are a couple of things I can do if it helps my spouse feel calmer. And then the flip side is the neat person, when the messy person describes why it is that they can't, be bothered to line up their shoes, put their shoes in the right place, or, hang up their coat. Then all of a sudden, that it's stressful, that they're coming home from a stressful day and it just doesn't even dawn on them. And then the tidy person's yelling at them and it's, spirals from there. All of a sudden the tidy person could think, oh, you're right. Like with a coat, maybe I could just put up a hook on the inside of the closet door and that would happen. And, the coat would be away, but I'm not insisting on a hanger and all these other things, which are like 8 steps.
A few simple steps might go a long way toward placating the other person and to bring you to a neater disposition. Right.
And I would tell the tidy people, if you're doing this on your own, that whenever you have the messier person not doing something you've asked them, you got to ask yourself how you can simplify what you're asking them to do. So the example I gave before is putting a hook on the inside of a coat closet. That's like a 3-step process.
And it's also important not to go ballistic over it, because that will, a battle of the wills.
But and my point is, you're more likely to get quote unquote compliance if you make the systems easier. So neat people, clients, I can't even count on 2 hands how many people who are the neat and tidy ones asking how you get people to put things in hampers. Instead of, because they'll say, oh my God, my spouse puts things on top of a hamper. I'm like, take away the lid. Now you can see the tidy people like, oh, a lidless hamper, that bothers me. But then I'm
get an automatic lid.
You can get an automatic, but the automatic lid closes and they're going to put the clothes on top. But
there are some that might open when there's weight on it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yes.
There's all kinds of systems out there.
Yes.
And so Kelly, just mention the book and the website again.
So it's called Organize Your Way. It's available on Amazon. And then our website is pixiesdidit.com. And we have a blog. We have the quiz to figure out your organizing style. And our book is also for sale on our website.
But everyone can find lots of free tips there.
Yes, a lot of free tips.
Okay,
I've been writing for a decade.
Okay, and I'm sure everyone can find useful tips, regardless whether they're neat or less neat. I just remind everyone that if you've missed any part of this program or you want to tell someone else about it, you can find it as a podcast at nccradio.org. And please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College.